Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Beyond the Noise, where we help separate noise from signal in the esports industry. I'm Alex Fletcher. And in this episode, we're going to go over some very exciting news from Blizzard related to Overwatch Esports. So, over the past weekend at Blizzcon, it's announced that Blizzard's new Overwatch ecosystem will take the form of a professional Esports League modeled after traditional sports. And so I want to go out over exactly what was announced, the details that have surfaced in the last several days, really highlight some key points, figure out if this means what this means for the beginning and the future trajectory for Overwatch Esports, and then wrap things up with an outlook. All right. So exactly what did Blizzard announce? And there are a number of articles and press releases. And after the weekend, people from Blizzard, especially Nate Nancer, who's the director of Overwatch Esports, came out and did interviews. So there's quite a bit of information out there. But the bottom line is this Overwatch League will be an attempt to professionalize esports or Overwatch esports. It's going to feature things like player salaries, teams linked to cities, a global circuit of play. So basically bringing all of the cool things in traditional sports to esports that don't already exist. I think a lot of it is great. I mean, a number of these things are very badly needed, especially the notion of player treatment, but more specifically player development. Because if you look at what sports is, the reason it's a trusted global institution that it is across the world is that it's a medium for the personal development of its players. So whether you're amateur, pro-am, professional, there are positive benefits to taking part in sports. And I think by building structure around competitive video games, you help promote that, which is great. Of course, pro player treatment is important. We've seen a lot lately about how a lot of pro players are suffering from burnout. The Breaking Point documentary that featured Team Liquid showed really it's no cakewalk being a professional gamer even today. So Blizzard's attempt to make and to formalize the structure around a playing career in esports is very, very badly needed, and it's a great thing, I think. But one of the key points that you see when you read through a lot of the literature and the press releases and the media around this is that there's going to be a franchise system. And I think the first question is, and by franchise system, this is guaranteed spots for teams. So for those familiar with the North American sports industry, teams are guaranteed spots in leagues. They don't go anywhere. They may move from city to city, but they're never relegated. The question for Overwatch Esports is, what will introducing a franchise system this early in the life cycle of a league, of a competitive scene, and of a digital sport, in essence, do to the trajectory? Obviously, franchise teams, locality, it's all about grabbing a casual fan base. It's attracting team owners, giving them stability. But I think there's a huge unknown about the local or the demand for esports in local markets. Like, we see aggregate numbers about the number of esports fans, but no one really knows what it's going to mean to put a city in London in terms of the number of people casual fans who will show up to events consistently. So creating a churn of home games, no one really knows what that means monetarily. And the only way to find out is to actually do it. But still, there's quite a bit of unknowns. But most importantly, there's this shrouded or this cloud of unknown around the team sale process. Like, who's going to get these team slots? And we're going to talk about that in a second. But that's a huge unknown here, and something that's going to factor into what this league eventually becomes. And we'll quickly see the intent behind it once we figure out who's able to buy these teams, who ends up buying these slots, and who the team owners are of this initial set of franchises. So along those lines, I think one of the main questions for esports fans and supporters is because if you look at BlizzCon, you saw a tremendous or a number of very recognizable sports team owners, and it's very clear that Blizzard is going to make an effort to attract this growing interest from professional sports team owners and investors into Overwatch Esports, which is great. It's their prerogative, but immediately it brings up questions of, are there protections for endemic orgs in esports, large and small, right? So organizations who have been entirely instrumental to the growth of esports, will they be able to compete and compete for these team slots? Because if Blizzard sets a price threshold for these spots, the scale between even the most successful esports organization or the most successful esports organization who isn't funded or backed by investors or sports teams and even a low-rung sports team is incredibly different. So it could price a lot of endemic orgs out of the picture. And I took a look at the stream by Chanman V. He did a great stream with Nate Nancer. And about the 33-minute mark, Jason Kaplan asked him exactly that. What protections are there for these endemic orgs who exist in esports? And unfortunately, Nate danced around the question. And I think his response basically to me says that there will be no protections. And that's not a good thing in my opinion. But more importantly, when you start selling spots in leagues and you bring in team owners, you have to understand that what you're doing in essence is building a digital sport. So in order to have a league, in order to have a franchise, in order to have professional infrastructure, you have to construct a digital sport. And really that's the challenge that Blizzard is facing. And the question is, are all of these propositions for this Overwatch League happening too fast ahead of developing the medium, the digital sport around Overwatch? Not to mention there's some questions around, these are title-specific teams. So if team owners are pouring potentially, I won't say it because I don't know the amount of money for a slot, but or the player salaries, but let's say they're pouring 7 figures into these investments, but Overwatch just doesn't take off. This is a lot different from a Ted Leonsis and a Peter Gruber putting money into Team Liquid that has coverage across a number of games. So Overwatch doesn't take off. Well, we've got League, we've got CSGO, we've got Hearthstone. If Overwatch fizzles, if it flatlines, like no one knows what's going to happen, what happens? What happens to all of that investor interest? Is it good for the scene overall? I think in general, though, from my perspective, what I've heard, talking to people, that this is going to be a very investor-focused league. In other words, they're building a league to meet the sensibilities of this groundswell of money outside of esports, specifically in the sports world, trying to get in. I think that's good. It's just a question of whether the timing for doing that is based on the amount of money that wants to get into esports, or it being the right time for Overwatch to be the platform for making those investments. And in a related topic, I think everyone can kind of see the big bad E word looming, because no one is going to invest into a franchise model consistently unless there's exclusivity. As a matter of fact, franchise models indicate, or they go hand in hand with exclusivity. You can't have it. No one's going to buy a slot in your league if there are 3 other Overwatch circuits where other major organizations can play and players can just say, oh, I don't want to play here anymore, I want to go over there. No. It doesn't work that way. So I think we can all see that Blizzard's near-term support for these third-party tournaments is going to be short-lived. Unfortunately, chaos is really good for evolution. And esports competitive gaming has been around for a while, but Overwatch is extremely new. The game just launched literally in May. You need that time where there isn't a lot of top-down structure for things to sort out. I think, from my opinion, Blizzard's best move would be to use the 2017 season to help do that sorting out and then implement the structure. But once again, timing being what it is, there's so much money And by so much money, there's a lot of money out there looking to get into esports right now, and they really want to strike while the iron's hot and capitalize on that investor demand. So it is what it is. Now, where from here? Really, I think what this Overwatch League is shaping up to be is it's an attempt to get too big to fail. And if you look at, especially in the North American market, what the major sports leagues are, is they are cultural institutions, but they are enterprises that are too large to fail. Like the National Basketball Association, the NBA, the National Football League, the NFL, the Premier League in Europe. These things will never go away. They're going to be here longer than all of us will be. And so the model that Blizzard has communicated that they're going to take is one that they're trying to scale to get to that level, but they've got to do it fast. So sports, traditional sports, they have permanence, right? So when someone came up with football or basketball or baseball or ice hockey, there was no time frame for, hey, after a while, no one's going to want to play this. But with a video game, you do have a more limited scope. And so you do have to move a little bit more quickly. And I think that Blizzard realizes that, so they're trying to get to that point faster. So they've got this infrastructure around Overwatch where the game gains more of that permanence, which is good for them from a bottom line perspective, but also good for esports. And it's a question of how fast can that actually happen realistically. And then, of course, the guests versus the hosts being the people who have built esports into what it is today. At some point, if you tip the scales towards the money that's flowing into the leagues, or to esports, too fast, you can alienate a fan base and a community that's very invested in the success of people who've spent a great deal of their lives doing and building what esports is today. And then, of course, I really think eventually, if you look at Activision Blizzard, which is the parent company for Blizzard, the combination of Activision and Blizzard, they are very set on building an NFL style ecosystem. So to me, and this is my perspective, they're angling for media rights, and they want to get as many of their games in a position where they can begin to broker media rights with whichever networks or platforms are best suited to purchase these. Once again, that's their prerogative. It's just a question of, how strong are you going to allow those business drivers to affect how you deal with the community and the game itself. So that's all I have for this week. I think this is really exciting news from Blizzard. I think it's going to be a positive. I think we should always remain positive about things. But the structure that's being put around professional Overwatch play is a good thing. It's just the question of in what form and the speed with which these suggested features will be rolled out by Blizzard, and how that's gonna take effect for the entire scene. So once again, catch you guys later. Thanks for joining me.